Hi, parents, teachers, caretakers, and grandparents. Thank you. Thank you so much, for giving me the privilege to talk and to share my heart on how do we handle teenagers. I just want to bring yesterday's 4 points. I don't know whether you remember the previous session. We talked about compassion. For us to persevere in compassion, that was one of the key foundational thought. Not to give up on our kids. 2 is connection. We connect before we correct. Connection comes before correction. So in that connection, I talked about disarming the fear responses. Because in fear place, the children will not connect. They may not even understand. I said the logical part of the brain doesn't work in fear. And then we talked about redemption. And in that redemption, I talked about how we begin to work with them to help them to understand, saying, that's why the 2 statements that I made, in one of those places, I said, we connect with the Lord and we connect with our children and help them to connect with the Lord. So redemption is a place where we continue to help them, not to crucify them, condemn them, brand them, rather to help them to process their mistakes and failures and help them to move a different path. Let me put it that way. The last one we talked about is restoration. Now in the restoration, I talked about we need to pass it on. We need to pass the values. We need to spend time teaching. Now spending time teaching is going to be very, very critical in that place of restoration. And a very key paradigm that I talked about, we catch them doing right, not catch them doing wrong. So today, handling teens, part 2. Now, what do we do, with all of these addictions that are going on? Let me start with that, What do we do with children who are so addicted to phones, addicted to digital spaces, addicted to social media? How do we handle that? Let me just give you a little bit of a thought about a teen's brain, okay? Now, there are 2 things in the teen's brain. One, I call it the mirror neurons. The psychologists actually call it the mirror neurons. Now, what are mirror neurons? The mirror neuron convince us that when we see something, we are actually experiencing it. That's why. And many of our children, many of our preteens and teens have those mirror neurons in place. So that's why when they do something or when they see something, they feel that they're experiencing. Not when they do something. When they see something, they feel that they're experiencing it. Actually, they are not. That's why very young, when they get into pornography or go into some of those wrong places and things like that, they might be feeling that experience and unnecessarily triggering some of those hormones that they are not supposed to be triggered till a certain age. Now, one of the key things that you need to understand is this. A brain is not fully formed till the age of 24, 25. The brain is not fully formed. Some children might, mature a little early, still 22, 23. The brain is not fully formed. So the first thing is, we are very careful about what they are exposed to because of those mirror neurons. The second very important foundation, a truth, is this, that they have an immature prefrontal cortex. Now, what do I talk about? Now, prefrontal cortex is the one that controls judgment, control, impulses, and regulates emotions. So they have a very immature prefrontal cortex. Now, because of that, teens are very impulsive. Because of that, teens, like the fly of the moment, they just do something and then they feel like, oh, why did I do that? So they begin to walk in that place. So these 2 things that we have to understand about a teen's brain. There are lots of other things that I can talk about, but these 2 are key, especially when it comes to that digital space, especially when it comes to that place of addiction. Now, I want to compare our journey with our children like a house. Now, let me start with the walls, right? We build the walls, right? Now, the walls are these 4 walls in the life of our teenager that we need to build. 1 is self-image, 2 is sexuality, 3 is awareness of sin, and 4 is how they deal with shame. I'll talk about that again. First is self-image. 2 is sexuality. 3 is how they understand, how they see sin, and then how they deal with shame. These are the 4 major walls we have to, in our discipleship of our teenagers, we begin to help them to build. I know you might be saying, you started off talking about walls. We have not talked about the foundations. A foundation is very, very critical. That's the first thing, but that's a very big chunk. Let me talk about that in the later. So these 4 walls are going to be very critical. That's why there's a lot of confusion today. The children are struggling to understand. Now, some of their struggles, let me just say this, after 31 years of working with teenagers and young people, some of their questions are real. Some of their confusions are real. So we as parents, as caretakers, as teachers, I think we should not brand them. We should not condemn them. We should be careful. We should be sensitive. So I would always say, hey, my position is this is what I believe. My posture is I'm willing to come alongside. My position is this I will not compromise. This is what the Word of God says. But my posture is, hey, I'm ready to understand you. I'm willing to come alongside. I'm willing to work with you. I'm willing to walk with you. So that's the place. So we begin to build that 4 walls. As I said, I don't have much time. I could have explained just these 4 walls for the next 25 minutes. But to build these 4 walls is going to be very important. What the 4 walls are? First is self-image. And 2 is sexuality. And 3 is how do they see sin? Sin cannot be diluted. Sin cannot be diluted. Sin is sin. There's no black sin, white sin, red sin, gray sin. Sin is sin. And the last one is shame. How do they deal with shame? Because the enemy plays a huge part in many of our teenagers' lives, especially when it comes to guilt and condemnation. When they make a mistake, they feel so guilty about it. Today, after I finish this session, I'm meeting with a 20-year-old girl who grew up in an orphanage, and started doing things in certain places. And she and her sister, I had a WhatsApp call with them, and they said, Uncle, we would just like to come and meet you. Because the guilt is so big. The condemnation is so big. The condemnation is not from God. Conviction is from God. Condemnation is from the devil. So we have to deal with it. I was talking about a house. The second thing is those doors and windows. Now, we have to be very careful about those doors and windows, when to shut and when to open. Now, listen to me very carefully. What they see and what they hear is going to form their thoughts. Any of the teenager, what they see and what they hear is going to form their thoughts. So we have to be very careful about when to open, when not to open, when to gently open, when to put a screen when you open. I think you get what I'm saying, So we as parents have to be involved. I know that many times they've asked me this question saying, as a teenager, I don't want to control. Now they're all teenagers, so I just want to... Don't walk away. Even a teenager would love to connect. It's a wrong misconception. It's a misconception that many of the people have saying, that I can't connect with teenagers. No. If you spend time, your teenager will connect. Will spend time. Actually, they want to spend time more. They want to connect more. It's just that we have got so busy with our phones and with our work and with our places that we don't connect with the teenagers. So that's the second place. I talked about the doors and windows. The next one that I will talk about is the roof. The roof for the house. Now, the roof is, I would call it the parenting style. What's our parenting style? Now, there are 2 extremes. One is an authoritative parenting style, and one is a permissive parenting style. I'm beginning to see this. People who have been raised up by authoritative parents are now having children, and they're saying, I will not be like my dad. I will not be like my mom. So I'm going to be very permissive to my children. Do whatever you want to do. I talked about it yesterday a little bit about structure and nurture. I think both is very important. So what kind of a parenting style that I would recommend or I would encourage you is an authentic parenting style. It's not authoritative or it's not, permissive. It's an authentic parenting style. And now in the authentic parenting style, you would begin to tell them what it is, correct, at the same time connect. There are structures in place and there are also nurture that is happening. Now, what if you give a lot of structure to the child and very less nurture? You give a lot of structure, don't do this, rules and all of that. The child will lose the trust. The teenager will lose the trust. What if you give a lot of nurture and very less structure? And you give a lot of nurture, your teenager will not grow. He'll not grow. Nothing challenges him. Nothing challenges her. He or she will not grow. The last one is the foundation. Now, what's the foundation? The gospel. We as parents, as teachers, as caretakers, as grandparents, whatever is your role in the life of your teenagers right now, I think we need to share about the Lord. The best place is for them to meet with the Lord and seek the Lord and start walking with Him. I did a small, not a research, but I did a small study some months ago. And I was so impressed to see that so many of the top missionaries and top people who have done things in the world, they came to know the Lord in the age group of 12 to 17. In the age group of 12 to 17. So the teenage years, the Barna statistics says that, over 50-60% of the children, who accept the Lord are in that age group. So we need to come to that place to understand this, that we have to share the gospel. Not an exaggerated gospel, not an undermined gospel. It's the gospel in its whole truth. We need to share it. Now, let me just go into some issues, some key issues that we have to deal with teenagers today. One of the first things that today a lot of research talks about is multitasking addiction. Now, I believe multitasking is okay. I believe multitasking is good. That you're able to do several things at the same time. Some of them are leaders, are able to do things. But what's happening with our teenagers is not multitasking, it's task switching. So they are involved in some task, and something else comes up, they leave this task and they switch to something else. And then something else comes up, they leave that task and go into something else. And from there they go to something else. From there they go into something else. And finally they wonder where they started off. Task switching is not going to be great. Why? Because it gives the dopamine skirt, that one message that has come and things like that. And they begin to do it. So over a period of time, they are not nurtured towards consistency. They're not nurtured towards some place where they need to focus and begin to work on. They're not able to, in that place. Now, it's very important for us to understand this. Very, very important for us to understand this. In multitasking addiction, it's because of so many different distractions that are there. That's why they're beginning to multitask. So we need to see how we can minimize and help them minimize the distraction. Not we trying to minimize the distraction, helping them minimize some of those distractions. And what are some of their top, foundations or top steps that they need to tread on? Another key word is texting addiction. Potentially dangerous or impulsive behavior to get what it is. That's exactly what texting addiction is. That you're all the time, somebody has texted and said, I have to somehow reply. How many times I have done that I've replied and then I wondered, I should have not replied. Maybe I should have waited. Maybe I should have thought about it. Maybe I should have asked somebody else about it. See, teenagers don't have that maturity. That's what I talked about. So they immediately try to text and sometimes they land up in some soups, land up in some issues. So we want to see how we can help them in that place of a texting addiction. Another key word is Insta addiction, Instagram, So Insta addiction is this. The chemical neurotransmitters associated with motivation and reward response is what Insta addiction tries to trigger in the human brain. So there are many, many kids, I was in one of the places talking 2 years ago, and this boy came to me and he just said, Uncle, I'm Insta addict. I'm proud that I'm an Insta addict. And I said, oh, really? He said, I would post about 17 selfies every day. 17 selfies. And I said, why? And he said, I like it. But you know what the issue was? The issue was he hated himself. He was screaming for attention. He was screaming for a place where somebody would come in and then he would compare with other posts and they say, oh, for her, so many people, commented, so many people liked it. For me, nobody liked it. He begins to go in that place. And it was a very difficult journey, very, very difficult journey. I think in that social media place, I would always say, again, connect with your children. I don't know what are your principles, but connect with your children. With my children, with my teenagers, I've always told them saying, hey, the moment you get into a job, you see how you can get into social media. Otherwise, there's a lot of bad there more than a lot good. I said, wait till you guys get into a job. Once you get into a job, you're free. You see how you can, want a social media or in a place. And some of them said, no, we will do it after we married. I said, whatever it is, it's your choice. But in a place where we begin to talk and share and connect, there's another key word right now with teenagers. It's big right now, and during COVID it became very, very huge. It's self-harm addiction. It rises from social media anxiety. Self-harm actually calms the teenagers, from control to controlling you. There are so many times I've spent time with teenagers who have cut themselves. Usually some of the teenagers would cut here, or some of the teenagers, if they are going to be in the public spaces, they would not cut here. They would put cuts on their thighs or on their calves where nobody sees it, especially on their thighs. That's where they would cut. Now, does it pain? Actually, they don't feel physical pain because it numbs the emotional pain that they are going through. That's why some of them really cut. I recently saw a girl in one of the schools, having this kerchief all around. And I said, what happened? She said, no, I got hurt, sir, and things like that. And as she came for counseling, as I was talking, and I just said, can you remove it? Tears rolled down, and she removed it. Almost 25 times she has cut herself. And there are cuts that are very deep. And she says, every one of these cuts has a story. Every one of these cuts have a betrayal. See, I think very important as parents, as teachers, as caretakers, as grandparents, to be alongside with our teenagers to help them out. We need to help them out. Because the world is just putting them down. It's damaging their inner script. They're beginning to walk in that place. I'm telling you, I sometimes sit and cry because some of these teenagers are struggling and they have no safe adults around them, nobody to connect with them, nobody with whom they can share, that they can just be who they are. I got a beautiful message from one of my daughter yesterday. She was graduating and I took some time and I told my wife it's going to take almost about 7-8 hours, for me to go and be there in the whole graduation service and come and all of that, but I'm going to go. And yesterday evening, she sent a message and said, Dad, thank you so much. She's one of our adopted daughters. And she sent a message saying, Daddy, thank you so much for being there, for coming and making this a memorable day for me. I would never forget this, And I came back and I showed my wife and I said, this is all we live for. This is all we live for. We need to connect with our children. Our children are longing to have us spend time. I know I have a lot of different things on my mind. There are lots of different things that's happening. But for me to make that eternal investment was a very critical thing. Let me give another key word. It's called anhedonia. What's anhedonia? Anhedonia is a reduced ability to experience pleasure, pushing the exciting stimulators to much higher and higher levels. So if the teenager's brain got excited at this level when they are really getting into different social media and digital spaces and all of that, their excitement levels, so this level of excitement is no more giving them pleasure. And technical word is dopamine. That hormone dopamine is not even squirting. It's not even coming in for them to give that pleasure. So that place is going higher and higher and higher. See, when the children are very small, all you have to do is, I'm going to tell you a story. They say, oh, I want a story. And then when they grow big and you say, I'm going to tell a story, they say, what story? And then you say, oh, I'm going to tell you this amazing story. And it becomes very difficult because they grow higher and higher and higher. I can keep talking about it. But I want to give you this addiction process. I can't explain it, but I want to give this. The first comes exposure. And then comes usage, and then there is a tolerance level, So in that usage and tolerance level is where they begin to swing up and down. And after the tolerance level is being, conditioned, then they come to that place of a craving dependence. And then from there, they go to addiction control taking over. And then they go for relapse and repetition. And then again, exposure. So it all starts with exposure. Where we stop with exposure. That's the addiction process. Exposure, usage, tolerance, craving dependence, and addiction, and relapse and repetition. And more you repeat, more you are getting dependent on it. So today, we don't use a word called digital addiction. Teenagers don't like it. We call digital dependence, in a place of how we begin to walk in. I just have about 6-7 minutes. And let me just quickly read some of the questions that has come on social media. And how do I answer some of these questions? Well, the first question is this. I'm never honest, uncle, when I communicate with my friends. I've always be careful about what I say, as I can be judged and my friends can involve in bitching. That's the word that they use, bitching, right? Bitching behind me. They can use, they can use whatever I say. What do I do? See, our children are struggling in a world where there is so much of gossip going on. Not just today, it's not just a physical gossip. There's a lot of virtual gossip that's going on. There's a lot of social media gossip that's going on. And everybody's very interested in the gossip. I think this is where, as a parent, where we walk in and we help them to understand, I have nothing to prove, nothing to lose, nothing to hide. We don't have to worry about, we don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't have to lose anything. Just give your best. That's where I think we need to walk alongside and help them. It's that connection, and conversations are going to be very critical in that space. A friend who is an opposite sex, the next question, began to share with me all the secrets and trust me so much. And I don't know how to react. I know this person is doing wrong things, but this person trusts me, and I've never had anyone trust me like this before and share. Is it wrong? Basically, he's saying, is it wrong for me to be with this person? See, why this person is saying, they look at that statement, I've never had anyone trust like me before, like this. I've never had anyone trust me like this before. You see what I'm saying? I think we need to come to that place. If I put one thing in the life of our mentoring and handling teenagers, I would always say trust. Gain their trust. Trust is going to be very, very critical. How we are going to gain that trust. Trust will bring them to that place of safety where we win that trust. And there are things that will break the trust. Sometimes our trust upon our children, sometimes our children's trust upon us. But that's where we begin to really carefully, by God's grace and God's mercy and God's wisdom and God's provision, we begin to walk in that place of gaining that trust. That gaining that trust is going to be very crucial. Find divine appointment spaces where you can make some deposits to win that trust. And that's going to be a crucial place. And like I talked about my daughter, where I went in, I think that was a deposit of trust, that she began to trust me up. I'll leave you with just maybe two more questions. I love chatting with strangers whom I do not know. I feel safe as I don't know them and they don't know me. Is this wrong? I've seen this so much. Teenagers are getting into some of those spaces. There are so many apps that have come up that you can just go and chat with strangers. Just enjoy chatting with strangers and talk all kinds of rubbish. And I'm telling you, these strangers are people are not very interested in these girls, interested in these boys. Many of these strangers always use this word called, oh, you seem to be amazing. Oh, you seem to be more mature than your age. Oh, you're just amazing in the way you're talking. Oh my goodness, I've never met a girl like you. That's all they need. Can we give this inside the house? Can we give this in our classrooms? Can we give this in our families so they don't have to reach out to strangers? I think it's a very critical place, very, very critical. And it takes time and space. Now, let me just take one last question. Some of the episodes and videos I have seen have affected me in my thinking about other people. I doubt people a lot. I can't trust anyone. And do you think what I've seen has influenced me? Definitely. That's why I talked about what you see. Two gates, what you see and what you hear is very critical. So you have to be very careful as you begin to walk with your children. What they see and what they hear is going to be very critical. Very, very critical in that space of how they're beginning to walk, how they're beginning to do things. So what are they exposed to is going to be a very critical space, Let me just take this one more last question. Uncle, one steady, within quotes, that means somebody who's in relationship, right? That's a word that teenagers use, a steady person, A person has been pushing me to send him my nudes. He says if I really love him, I would do it. I don't want to do it, but at the same time, I don't want to lose him. Please help me. Oh, I've dealt with so many cases during COVID of so many girls sending their nudes just to win that trust. Win that place of connection with that boy, And many of these boys, what they have done is taken those notes and put it on social media and sent it to all their other friends and all of that to show, saying, hey, she trusted me and sent me this, and a lot of lustful plays and crap and all that happens in, now, when a girl does this, and I've sat with so many of the teenagers, and my heart just breaks. When a girl does this, I always see two things. One, there is an absent father, or there is an authoritarian father. I would put it in a different way. I would say, one, there is an absent people in the family who don't connect with the kid, or there is an authoritarian people around always finding mistakes. I think both the extremes are not going to help. It's not going to help. We have to come to a place to understand this, that we need to be there. We need to be present. We really have to be present. Just imagine for a young girl to, a teenager, 13, 14, 15, 16, to send her notes to somebody and then feel guilty about it. And that's why I see many of the teenagers start cutting themselves, because they have sent the notes and then they feel very bad about it and feel very condemned. I've dealt with lots and lots of cases over a period of time. And sometimes I would just say, hey, I think we need to build our families. We need to build our walls around our families. We need to build our safe places for our children. We need to build our safe place for our children. There are so many teenagers who are hurting. There are so many children who are hurting. I told you about my story of how I was abused and how I grew up in a very difficult scenario. And adding to all of this, I was physically abused very badly. There are nights my back would be bleeding with blood and I would go and sleep in a graveyard. And adding to all of that, from the time I was just about 3-4 years old, several men began to sexually abuse me. I hated men. My first man that I trusted in my life was when I was just 23, 24. That was the first time I trusted a man. I couldn't trust anyone. It was a very difficult journey. So when I sit with teenagers, when I sit with young people, today my heart just pains. Because I always say, where are the people to stand with these children? I'm so privileged to be here just to share with you all. I don't know what your journey is, and I don't know what your journey has been and what you have gone through. I don't know. But would you, whatever it is, I keep saying this to my children. Yes, I didn't have a proper father. I didn't have a father at all. But nobody can stop me from being a father. Does it hurt that I don't have a father? It hurts. I speak in many places and big stages, and sometimes I feel like if my father would have been there at the back, he can actually look at me and say, oh, that's my son. But I don't have anybody. My wife, she has 2 brothers. So she sometimes calls both the brothers and begins to talk. And whenever she calls, that trigger comes to me. I look at her and I just said, I jokingly say these days, and I say, oh, you have brothers? Yeah, you're talking great. I don't have anyone. I really literally don't have anyone. I wish I had a brother. I wish I had a sister. I want to say this. As parents, don't give up your responsibility of walking with your children. That's the critical need of the hour. We need to intentionally disciple our children. Let me just close in prayer. Father, I just want to thank you. Thank you so much for your grace. Lord, I pray for my brothers and sisters who have gone through these 2 sessions. Father, I pray that you will give them that grace. I don't know what their journey has been. I don't know where they have come from. I don't know what they have gone through. And I don't know what their present situation is. But Father, I pray right now in the name of Jesus that there would be such greater breakthroughs. And you would give them that intentionality to re-script their inner script and re-script those spaces, even inside their families, in their relationships, that they would connect with their teenagers. That once the teenager crosses 14, 15, they would not detach, rather they would attach and spend more time connecting. And they would have an amazing journey as the children grow up. I pray for much grace. I pray for much mercy. Thank you so much for giving us this time. We love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.